How's everyone doing? Today we're ranking the 16 personality types on just how athletically inclined they are. So let's get into it. We're going to define athletic as a general desire to compete. And, I already used the word general, so we're kind of screwing up already. But a general competence when performing physical sports. So a physical disposition, which is going to be described throughout the video for each of the 16 types. Of course, once again, as a precursor so that I don't get hate comments. All of these personality types are going to be athletic, mainly based on nurture. And I'm going to go through that as we go through the list. Some personality types are going to have an easier time being just talented physically, whereas some are going to have specific nurtures to kind of bring that out of them. But I'm going to kind of go through which types are more likely to go into sports, which types are more interested. It's not that one personality type can't do it. I watch a lot of sports, so I know that from personal experience of watching a lot of sports and typing a lot of sports players, that all of these personality types can be very, very good athletically and be absolute S tier when it comes to their potential. All human beings just kind of have a natural disposition for being athletic when they train skills. So it's not exactly saying that one personality type just can't do it or one just easily can, but some are going to have an easier time. Some are going to be drawn to it for different reasons. Some are going to feel the desire to do sports for one reason or another, maybe social pressure. So I'm going to kind of go into the nuance a little bit more about all of these personality types, why they might like sports and why they might not. If you haven't already, please join the OnType team by subscribing, and let's get into it. So first we have INFJs. INFJs, I would say, are a little bit more athletic than people think. INFJs, they do have extroverted sensing, which is kind of the athletic function. It has to do with physical sports, physical competition. It's a lot about comparing yourself to others, competing. It has that introverted intuition connection too, which I'll get into. The desire to win, the desire to do something, to have victory, never giving up, right? Introverted intuition is all about never giving up, tenacity. So if you're playing a sport and you're losing by a couple goals or whatever, you're gonna see the path to victory. See you have the desire, of course, to win. That's very high up, but you also can strategize. You can see the pathways. You can see, okay, if I do this, I can do this, and then I can do this, and you're finding that pathway to victory. And that ability to strategize is underrated within INFJs, and that ability to just be physically talented when they practice with that extroverted sensing aspirational. At first, INFJs, and this is where the reputation comes in, a little bit clumsy here and there. They might be a little absent-minded. They might be a little awkward. But when INFJs actually develop their skill and practice, that extroverted sensing aspirational kicks in, and they can then have that talent develop in tandem with that ability to strategize and think and win. And that can make them at the absolute S tier when it comes to the ability to compete. But some things might hold them back, and here I'm in a slot. I think for INFJs, A tier is good, and I'm going to explain why I have some of these different labels and what they mean. But there's kind of a goated quality to the A tier in this specific video, and I'll get into why. Because these types are the types that have the athletic potential but don't always realize it. But when they do realize it, it's going to take a little something extra. It might take the diligence, the hard work to develop yourself. It might take the humility to realize you're not the most talented right away. But if you practice and work hard, you can become the most talented. And that combination with talent, with the nurtural experience of humility, of hard work, can actually make these types the most goated of all the personality types when they develop. And that's why a lot of the quote-unquote goats of the different sports will often be these types, but not always. And we'll get into that. It's a very nuanced subject. I think for INFJs, though, A tier definitely fits because of the things I talked about. The combination of strategy with athletic potential can definitely lead them to be very high, but they can be a little bit awkward at first. They might not immediately get the skill. They might need a few days, a few weeks to warm up and start feeling it, start practicing it, get their body in it, get focused on it. But once that starts to develop, you're going to see that skill develop, and then they can use their intelligence to kind of aid that, the tactics, the thinking, trying to find the best way to do something, the best path forward. ENFJs is a little bit different. ENFJs do have a pretty good athletic natural disposition. They can definitely just naturally be athletic with extroverted sensing child. But ENFJs aren't always as competitive as INFJs because they do have that FE hero. Sometimes they just don't want to hurt other people's feelings. They don't always want to be ruthless or super competitive. They want to connect. They want to have a good time. They want to have fun. ENFJs can definitely be athletic, and that's why they're in like the potential tier, because they absolutely have the potential to be on the top tier. But they're not always going to want to compete. They're not always going to want to hurt people's feelings. They might find different niches, whether it's relationships, friend groups, partying. They can sometimes find different extroverted realms that aren't always going to be the athletic world, and that can dilute it a little bit. They do have a good competence when performing a physical sport, but they don't always have the desire to do it at the very top level. They don't have as much potentially a drive, a competitiveness as some of the other types when it comes to the absolute top tiers of sports. That being said, they absolutely have the potential. And then we have INFPs, and INFPs are a little bit different. INFPs, they have pessimistic NI, which means they don't always want to win. They can be hopeless. They can be giving uppy, in my experience, with playing with INFPs on lots of sports teams. They can definitely have a disposition of, okay, screw this, we're going to lose, it's over. And that hopelessness can be combined with the fact that they're just not always very competitive. They have extroverted sensing trickster. They're not always very competitive. INFPs like sports, which are sometimes a little bit different. Maybe solo sports, whether it's rock climbing, jujitsu, I don't know, gymnastics, maybe solo sports that are more about beating yourself and being able to develop internal strength, yoga, maybe cycling. I think INFPs can like maybe running, right? Marathon running. INFPs like sports which are less athletics maybe not even a great word for it, but competitive team sports they're going to be a little bit shying away from. Individual sports where they can develop their internal strength and kind of develop themselves, they're going to be much more happy doing. And it depends on their nurture. If they grow up being athletic or going outdoors, they're going to have that desire more than if they kind of grow up as a homebody. But low SC, low competitiveness, pessimistic NI, not always wanting to do things, not always seeing the path, not always wanting to compete. They don't always have a natural physical talent right away. They can be a little bit awkward and clumsy with that very low SC at first. Now they develop that as they get their body moving and they can feel it in their body and they can gain that. They have the potential. That being said, they're not always going to want to be athletic. In general, INFPs can stay away from athleticism. They might see it as too cutthroat, too competitive. It might upset them. They might be a little bit sensitive for it. They might not always like that environment. So in general, they might shy away from that and be a little bit like, nah, I'm just going to go over here, do something else, do collecting, do an individual sport, hang out with my friends, get into a relationship, do different things. ENFPs, it can be the same way. Sometimes they're just like kind of who cares. They have different priorities as well. They have that SC in that very last slot. So they're not always going to feel the physical talent right away. They're going to maybe feel a little bit awkward at first. And that can cause them to feel a lack of motivation with pessimistic NI, where they're not going to have that same level of tenacity and desire to never stop trying like an INFJ would. That would actually end up developing them. Now, they can be absolutely extremely good at sports and very athletic. And they can have, like, I think Muhammad Ali is an ENFP, and he's probably the best boxer, top tier, right? So for ENFPs, it's definitely a potential they have. They can use their predictive abilities with high NE, predict what other people are going to do, and kind of have a defensive style. Very good defensive, like predict what other people are going to do, be able to react to it with introverted sensing, and have that NESI, which is more of a defensive athletic style versus, or an enduring athletic style like a marathon runner, versus the more tactical, like a sport like tennis or a team sport that might be more focused on tactics versus a defensive. I mean, defense is a part of tactics. It's just a different style. I don't want to alienate too many people talking about sports too much, but in general, SINE users are a little bit more defensive. They're willing to react to what the other person's going to do. They're willing to be free flowing with their strategy versus an NISE approach, which is more, here's my strategy, I'm going to impose on you, and I'm going to impose this on your experience. So just different styles, but that's a whole video for itself. INTJs, that more imposing style, are also, I would say, A tier. Because INTJs, they also have that tactical strategic vision, which has kind of intuitive genius mixed with, that desire to win, mixed with that potential for physical skill and the desire and enjoyment of physical sports and competition. Now, what holds them back from that S tier, they're not always going to go towards sports. They might go to intellectual things. They might not always want to do sports. They might feel a little insecure about it. They might not always be the most talented at the very start. But as they develop it, they're going to see their talent is there. It's just kind of a hidden gem, excuse me. So INTJs, same exact reasons as INFJs, have that athletic potential with that SE aspirational. They have that ability to want to win and never give up, that tenacity and genius that comes, strategic genius that comes with NI Hero. And the fact that while they don't have the talent right away, if they build it, they're going to be potentially the most talented, leads to that GOAT tier, as they can actually end up being the absolute best, mixing the hard work and talent. And then we have ENTJs. ENTJs, I'm going to say same as ENFJs. Really good athletically, not always, fit with the drive to be the absolute best, not always desiring to be as competitive as some of the other personality types, just kind of enjoying it, pretty good at it, kind of just has the potential if they want to, but doesn't always want to. Sometimes they're just focused on other things. So ENTJs and ENFJs are like kind of just chilling when it comes to athletic things. Often they enjoy being above average, but they don't need to be the absolute best. It's not a huge ego thing for them. They already feel like they're pretty athletic. They don't always care to prove it or be the absolute top. They just kind of enjoy it when they do it, and they're talented enough, but they're not always going to care. It's kind of an interesting one. That child function can sometimes just be childish with it, but in kind of an innocent, joyful way where they enjoy doing it, but they don't feel like they have anything to prove. And then we have INTPs. INTPs, I would say, in general, are kind of in the not category. SE trickster, not always very physically talented right away. Of course, that's something they develop. And sometimes just they don't necessarily want to. It's a lot of effort. It's competitive. That can make them kind of insecure. They have to have a lot of hope and desire and motivation. They can sometimes feel kind of passionless, who cares, and have a give up mentality when it comes to competitive things. They don't always care to win. They like to let other people win anyway, so they feel good. Yeah, INTPs just won't always even care. They might be invested in intellectual things. They might be invested in video games. They're more likely to play League of Legends than play basketball, but I think INTPs do have the potential because they are extremely intelligent. They can develop the skill over time through their body and be able to really feel it themselves. And INTPs do have kind of a competitive genius with them as well, with that ability to be strategic. And that's what's so interesting about all these types. They might just have different things they're really good at, like being the GOAT of League of Legends, for example, an INTP, or potentially being one of the better poker players. It's just different things for them. But when it comes to physical athletic sports, they don't always go into it. They're kind of a little bit of a nah, but they do have potential, and a lot, like INFPs, a lot of individual sports will attract them a lot more without having to compete against other people and have that pressure. Things that are a bit more focused on things like yoga or jujitsu. I think INTPs would want to get into jujitsu or rock climbing or something like that. ENTPs can kind of go both ways. They can be a little bit less interested in sports in general. They have that lower SE. They don't always want to compete. They're not always going to be motivated to compete and beat other people with regards to a physical conquest. That being said, ENTPs, like I just said with INTPs, can enjoy individual sports like rock climbing, hiking, marathon running. Although I guess marathon running it's kind of individual because it's not a team. You're competing against yourself. I think that's where ENTPs can really shine. They have a more defensive style when it comes to sports. They're not always going to be motivated to compete to the absolute S tier, but they can. They have the potential, just like all these types. They're just not going to necessarily care to do it. And then we have ISFJs. ISFJs, I would say, they don't always care that much. Lower SC and NI, they don't always want to win. They are a little bit more competitive, because they have higher SC, so they feel a little bit more competitive anxiety than an ENP who just wouldn't care at all. So ISFJs are a bit more competitive, and they do get pretty salty if they're losing, because they do feel competitive anxiety, aka that SC, if I do not win, I am going to be rejected from the tribe. So ISFJs feel that pressure a little bit more. But in general, not always caring that much. They don't always need to be the star. Some part of them likes to be, but they don't need to be the absolute star, have all the attention. It's a lot of attention and pressure that they don't necessarily always go for. They like to chill. They like to do their own thing. They like to get by. But ISFJs, while they do have athletic potential, absolutely, it's going to be from a nurture perspective. They're not always just going to join a sport and really want to do it and want to be the best and develop their skill. It's like if their father is really good at a sport, a la Khabib Nurmagomedov type of thing, where you're trained from young and you gain that introverted sensing experience, where you have so much experience that you're just like a rock, versus a more organic talent of just picking up a sport, loving it, and wanting to do it. So it's just different. It's more based on experience. And same for ESFJs. If they have the experience, they're going to be inclined. Now, ESFJs have SE Critic, which is a little bit more physical. They really have a super high standard. They have those really high standards for physical performance. And because of that, they can kind of fine tune their skills to be extremely high level at skills. And that's why you will see lots of SE critics like a Tom Brady or a Nadal type of person in the GOAT tier. The only thing holding them back from that A tier is they won't always necessarily get into sports. Now, I think ESFJs can get into sports, but I would say ESTJs would get into sports even more because they're a little bit more focused on that reputation, on that how it looks to be in sports. Whereas ESFJs prioritize connection, they prioritize friends and relationships. So they might be a little less interested just because they have that FE hero wanting to make everyone feel good, but really just wanting to find people who like them and value them. Now, that can work out in a sports environment, and that's why I think ESFJs have that potential. Now, I'm wondering if I should even put them higher. That's the thing, it's interesting. ESTJs, same exact thing. Now, they can both be kind of, I don't know, this one's kind of interesting. I think maybe because ESFJs are generally more relationship focused, they're not always going to want to do it as much as like an ESTJ. But if we go to ISTJ real quick, as we'll get back to that with the ESJs, I think once again, kind of a potential thing for ISTJs. They're not always going to have the drive to do it, the drive to physically compete all the time, to never give up, but they are going to develop that skill over time if they start from a young age and be very talented. And they can enjoy physical sports, but they prefer their individual sports as well, being an SI user, as I've talked about lots of times. And sorry if you're skipping around to certain types. I am kind of doing it through all the different types, different explanations. If you are actually watching still, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. But yeah, ESTJ, same thing as ESFJs. I'm kind of having a difficult time seeing. I don't know. I'm going to put them in the potential tier because I do think they have the potential. ESTJs have the potential with that SE critic skill development. I might even say they're a little bit higher, but the problem is I have to try and distribute the list naturally to not make it, if everyone's athletic, then no one is type of thing. But ESTJs might not always be interested. Both ESJs lower SE, so they might not always be interested in sports, but they can be very athletic when they get into them, and they can enjoy the glory and the perception and the social aspect of team sports quite a bit. So you'll see lots of ESJs in team sports because of that. But whether they individually have the drive to be the best, sometimes they're more focused on having a good experience and doing the things they need to do and having those social connections. ISFPs are going to be a little bit more in that category of natural talent, with SE being in that kind of parent slot. And I think that ISFPs and ISTPs are kind of similar in that way, in that they have very high talent, and if they can develop that diligence to work very hard, they can develop that talent to the absolute highest level, but they might not always develop that, just depending. And ISFPs can have that people focus as well, which you could argue is a distraction, as they're focused on how they feel about things and their emotions, and they're not being necessarily as analytical about it as like an ISTP. And we'll get into ISTPs. I'm skipping around here a little bit, but it's just because I have a lot to say on the differences. I think ESFPs, unlike ISFPs, just have that pure talent, right? And I know it's taken a long time to get to S tier if you actually made it this far. But ESFPs have SE Hero. They do have that natural disposition. SE Hero is just naturally athletic. It's naturally performative. It's naturally sporty. It likes to do things physically, move things around, impose their will, push people, shove balls, shoot balls. Like, they like to do that. They like to just move things physically. And they have that desire to compete and that desire to win. So that desire to win and compete means that they're just going to have that pure talent. Now, if they develop that through humility, if they lose or fail, they can become in that goated tier. But one thing that can sometimes hold these types back is the ego that comes with being very talented. And same thing with ESTPs. As we get into ESTPs, same thing, very, very talented naturally. But sometimes that can get in the way if they're too egotistical. But if not, they're going to just have that super easy time being physically gifted and talented and athletically inclined. So both ESPs, probably the most athletically inclined and talented straight up. All of the other types like ISTPs and ISFPs and INFJs and INTJs are going to have to work for it a little bit more and focus on diligence and working hard to fully develop their SE into a more optimistic space for them. But when these types do it, they're going to become very athletic and very, very talented. And ISTPs can have that kind of thrill-seeking desire, the competitive drive, where they are very talented and they enjoy being talented, but they might have to develop those skills through practice and hard work. So this has gone on probably far too long. If you actually got this far, once again, thank you for watching. Please join the OnType team today. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about this list and why, and what videos you'd like to see next. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day.